Mrs Thatcher, up here, please.
Will you take an active part in the general election
Lovely.
Hello. Tons of energy left. I hope you have some. All right. That's a lot.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Mrs Thatcher, this is the first time you've spoken to British television since your resignation, so I wonder, because we haven't heard, as it were, your version of events and your side of the story. You've said in the past that you thought that what happened, that what led to your departure was really because people took fright at the opinion polls. Isn't it really the case that what had happened was that your cabinet had, in a sense, begun to desert you because they were worried about the way you were handling things like Europe and like the poll tax? And wasn't that the real reason why things turned out the way they did?
No, I don't think it was. And I would say so if I thought it was. There had been some controversy about the community charge, but everyone agreed it was based upon the right principles. But we just got it up too high. And that would have been corrected by putting in more tax, a bigger proportion of taxpayers' money. No, I think it genuinely was what I said, that certainly there's some on the back benches who were getting very alarmed at the opinion polls. But I think we'd perhaps had fewer people who, this time, had had experience of what happened before. And they demonstrated that in that they didn't give one a clear run on the first ballot. That was worrying. I thought it would come all right. But when I returned, I thought, well, I simply must speak to members of my cabinet and one or two other senior ministers. And I'm not going to say who said what, but they weren't 100%. And they were very concerned, although they said, most of them, not all, that they would certainly support me. There was just a feeling that I thought, well, if we get through, we'll probably get through, but the things will go on being divided with this kind of little bit of uncertainty. I had just better decide, because it should have come clear on the first ballot.
Can you just talk...
I think that decision was right. May I say so? I think that decision was right, although the letters I had, we had over 160,000 in the end, were marvellous. They didn't understand, and they contested what happened, because they said, we voted for you in a general election, and we haven't been asked. Nevertheless, that was not the position one was faced with. One was faced with a position where one only got 204 votes, and it really should have been more. They said I should have been at home during that period. I was in Paris signing the treaty we had worked for.
I want to take you on to
that. Let's go on to that.
Because that was an evening that none of us, I think, who watched it on television, and certainly those who were there, will quite forget. Now, what we saw on that occasion was almost you come bursting out of that embassy door to the waiting microphones, and you very quickly said that you were going to stand for the second ballot. But I wonder if you could tell us actually how it was, because moments before that you were waiting upstairs, weren't you, for a phone call?
Yes, we were. We were, and I couldn't go off to the evening's engagement until we'd had it. And I was told the results. Immediately I said, but this means a second ballot. So we had not, in fact, got enough. But then it did not seem to me at that stage it would be difficult to get 3 or 4 more people to vote with us on the second ballot. And although it was not very easy to go to a second ballot, it didn't seem to me to be very difficult. Something happened while I was away that night. There were various meetings all over the place. I think in London, I couldn't obviously be here. And when I got back the next morning, it still seemed to me that I would have a good chance. But during the day, I got on with starting to get the confidence motion ready. And then thought I simply must see the cabinet and some other people. And it was just very strange. Have you seen a situation slip away from you? I'm a politician. I know. I can feel it. I can sense it. And when some people whom I expected to be absolutely staunch had very different views, said, look, I will support you, but I don't think that, that it is a foregone conclusion, then all right, no general can fight without a really good army behind. And I've indicated the view that I took. I'm still sure it was the right one under those circumstances.
When did you really first sense that the support had drained away to the extent that you had to reach that decision? Was it in the morning when you came back?
No, it was in the evening after I had come back.
Because you had a big meeting of colleagues over lunch, didn't you, at
yes,
number 10?
Yes, that was perfectly all right. Perfectly all right. And staunch.
Weren't there some suggestions at that all might not be well? I don't think people told you then about the division of numbers in the cabinet, but I think there was more than a hint there, wasn't there, that things might not be quite going your way, to say the very least.
Well, I came back and I saw quite a lot. And I learned a good deal from that. And then the advice that I had was that things were moving and changing in the House. And no, I was not going to cling. I either carried on with full authority. I knew I had the authority of the people, but I wasn't going to carry on without the authority of my party. I did not have enough. I had a majority. I had a majority on the first ballot. I had a majority, but I did not have a sufficient majority. And it would not have been enough to go on. The divisions would have gone on, that would have absorbed them. That is not good at that stage of a parliament for anyone. I still believe that the decision was right. And so after that, I confess, I went there, it was about 8:30, and I simply said, look, I have got to get back to number 10 to finish making up that speech. You realize I have got a motion of censure tomorrow, and I'm going in and I'm going to have a battle.
But of course, just earlier to that...
So I got back, and I think it was about 1:10 when I had just finished the speech, and I said that I would make up my mind, finally. The following morning, I'd sleep on it, and Dennis and I discussed it. And you know the result. I'm still convinced it was the right decision. What went wrong was that we did not get a big enough majority on the first ballot. And there was nothing I could do to cure that. That was the thing I couldn't get over. They said to me as I went through it, but you haven't been to ask us to vote for you. Other people have. And I thought, goodness me, do I, after 11.5 years, have to go and ask personally for a vote? I remember previous leadership elections. But there you are. They thought that I did, and I thought that that was not necessarily the right way to do it.
Because in the afternoon...
They had confidence or they hadn't. So it fell away very rapidly, early evening, and because of the first ballot not being sufficient, I took the decision.
In the end, when you had to come to that decision, after you'd seen the members of the cabinet individually, and one or two, one understands, had said point blank that they would resign if you carried on. That only underlines what you've been saying with such force that you couldn't go on.
Oh, I don't think anyone said to me, no one said to me they would resign if I carried on. No one.
That's interesting, because it is reported that at least
No one said to me they would resign if I carried on. I didn't see them all. I didn't see them all. I think I saw about 11 or 12 and one or two other people. But no one said to me. Not one.
But the crucial thing is that you then went back to number 10. You had a conversation with Sir Dennis Thatcher, Dennis, DT, as he's always known.
Yes,
now,
DT,
he
yes.
has always been an absolutely staunch defender of you, of course, as any husband would be, but he's been very valuable to you.
Well, he's absolutely marvellous. And I think he was a bit cut up too, that we didn't get more. But if we didn't get enough, then he thought it was better to resign.
So he was supportive in your decision there.
Yes,
he didn't try to talk you out of it.
No.
He realised the political situation too.
You must have full authority of your own party to do the decisive things which I have always done. Too many people were fearful of the opinion polls, and so that was the way it went.
And then the following morning, of course, you had, I suppose, what must have been...
I got up early, and things hadn't changed. So I decided to take the course of action, which I did. And then I went into the House.
Well, could I just, first of all, ask you to recall what must have been a very difficult meeting of the Cabinet?
Yes, of course it was. Of course it was. You don't take a decision like that without it being difficult, without heartbreak. Heartbreak there may have been, but it was the right decision.
But you had to get through it. Bernard Ingham, in his memoirs, has said that it was a traumatic experience. Those are his words.
Yes, it was. And it would have been very strange if it hadn't been. But we got through it.
In fact, you broke down.
We got through the House.
You broke down during that Cabinet, didn't you?
Yes, but I carried on.
And then the House.
By that time, I was back fighting fit, as you saw.
Just before that, though, the image that people will perhaps remember, as you said, the Cabinet was extremely difficult. And then you had to come out into Downing Street, and you had to face the cameras. In effect, you had to face the world. You had to come and make what was perhaps the statement of your life. And then I see that, we notice now that it's affecting you now, and it must have been
yes,
the most difficult.
Yes, it's not affecting my voice now. It's not affecting my voice. You're thinking back to traumatic things. But I managed to get through them. I managed to get through the television. I managed to get through the Cabinet, again, because there was something else to do. I had to get on to people, and I must say this, but Douglas Hurd and John Major said, if you wish to go on, we will propose you and second you again. And that was marvellous. That was marvellous. And then one had to get through Cabinet, and one or two people wanted to leave because they too, of course, wanted to make provision for their own candidature. Quite right. Quite right. But by that time, I had other things to do, and so I got on with them. The
almost final act, if you like, of the drama, and it was a drama, of your resignation, that speech you gave to the House. Now, you've said how difficult it was going through all the run-up, talking to the Cabinet, and all of that, the emotional strain that obviously, and we've seen, put you through. But what about the business of going to the House and making that resignation speech?
It is nerve-wracking. It always is in a full House, always. Whether it's at question time or an ordinary day or an extraordinary day, because the House was packed. And early on in the speech, I got a little frog in my throat, which you sometimes do, and I knew that I had to talk through it until I got some here, so that I could have a glass of water. And then all of a sudden, you start to get interruptions. And so you go from a prepared script, and it's spontaneous. You answer the questions that come. That just takes you out of yourself completely. You're so concerned with the debate and the quick thinking on your feet of the right reply. And then we got on to the more interesting parts of the speech. Let me say, if ever you're speaking, the economy is the most difficult thing to speak about. It tends to be in a sort of jargon. And however much you try to get rid of the jargon, you can't. You always can speak about the state of industry because that's human and living, but the actual public expenditure, monetary policy, public sector borrowing requirement is difficult. And you get that fairly near the beginning, so you get through it. And then you get on to things which live, like industry and commerce, and also some of your foreign policy and social services and so on. And it did just take off. I knew it was taking off. I knew when we got into debate it would be all right, but it just did.
Do you remember the moment? Do you remember the moment when Dennis Skinner intervened?
Yes, yes. He is a marvellous parliamentarian, and no one has been better at interjections than Dennis Skinner.
And he made a joke that you ought to go and be governor of the central bank in Europe, didn't he?
And he said, lots of money, lots of money. You know, he would say that.
And your reply?
What a good idea. It was fun.
I'm enjoying it.
It was fun.
I'm enjoying it.
I'm beginning to enjoy it.
I'm beginning to enjoy it.
Yes.
Were you?
Yes, because we got on to, yes, it's something which takes you out of yourself. The way to get out of yourself is to have such strong things to do immediately that requires all your concentration, all your thought, all your effort. And then you've forgotten what is bothering you because you've got something to do immediately. And for most of my political life, that has been so. Whatever the things that really were deeply concerning to me personally, one had to get on with something else, and that's how you just get through.
Let me ask you, if I may, though, about Thatcherism. It's a word that's much bandied about, and sometimes you've said, well, don't know really what it means because the principles of it were invented long before Mrs Thatcher.
Yes, they were.
But to other people, to some other people, Thatcherism means something negative. It means, I think, that they see it as a time of personal greed, of time when people were just out for themselves. And that's the sort of image that they have of Thatcherism.
What absolute nonsense. Don't most people want to work hard to do better by their own families, to have a better house, better holidays, better furniture? Isn't that a worthwhile thing? Wouldn't life be very much better if more people took responsibility for their families and for building their own future and building their own security? And when they do that and have a little bit over to help people less fortunate than themselves, isn't that a good thing? And aren't we trying to get the third world out of the poverty it's in by building up its industries and having some investment to go and help them with? John Wesley answered the question you've just put. Do not impute to money the faults of human nature. It's not the money, it's not the wealth you create, it's what you do with it. And most people do want a better standard of living. Many, many people use their money to do more for the arts, to see more, to enjoy more of the great artistic works, whether it be music, whether it be art. Look at the fantastic voluntary effort in this country. It's enormous. No, look, greed, isn't it absurd? Trade unions mostly argue for higher wages. They argue for bigger differentials. But are they then coming and saying greed? Some people are greedy. But people who want a better standard of living and a better way of life for their children are not. They're highly moral, they're highly valued citizens, and they're usually those people who look after their houses and their families, look after their neighbourhoods, join in doing things for their neighbourhood, community spirit. This is the real Thatcherism.
Isn't there always the danger that people might be seeing you still as trying to second-guess the Prime Minister?
Well, I hope they won't. I hope they won't. I did all my own first guessing for 15 years of what was right to do, and it wasn't guessing. It was going back to the right principles of passionate belief. And you asked me recently what things I remember. I recall one thing very vividly. In 1980, one finance minister from another part of the world, who actually really rather believed in what I was doing but hadn't seen it put into practice before, and saying to me, look, you're having difficulty. We're watching you very carefully. We're watching Britain very carefully. That's good. They always please me when they're watching Britain. Because if you can roll back the frontiers of socialism and in Britain roll forward the frontiers of freedom, other people will follow you. What an extraordinary thing to say. I knew I must keep going. My goodness me, I took a pounding. But we did. We did change trade union law. We did say to a company, look, if you're going broke, this is because you haven't got it right. And we're not going to pour taxpayers' money in to save you. When in fact, if there's any taxpayers' money, it ought to be going to bringing to birth the new industries. And for the first time, they had to take the consequences of their own action. What else is democracy and responsibility all about? We did, and we got people enthusiastic about enterprise. Do you know we've had more young people starting up on their own than ever before? It is a new spirit. That's the essence. To get the economy right, you have to understand human nature. There is a new spirit, and we did get it right. And I'm not going to see it go.
Just a final point on the whole business of the way your premiership ended. I think you've said that no Prime Minister really ought to have to leave in those circumstances. Of course, the counter-argument is it's almost like that old phrase about be you never so high, the law is above you. It's almost a sense, isn't it, in which you say be you never so high as Prime Minister, but you may be out of Downing Street by tonight, and Prime Ministers ought to know that.
Oh, if you're out for what I call constitutional reasons, of course. We were out for the reasons of the rules made by the Conservative Party for leaders in opposition. And that's very different. That's very different. The rules are still there. They're not rules which apply to the Labour Party or to any other party. This was the first time it had happened. And it happened. It happened. I took the right decision. I am now free to live another life of very practical use, both to the people of this country and internationally. I have a passion for Britain, for the spirit of the people, for their character. It's done wonders for the world in the past. It can still do wonders for the world of the future.
And what is your foundation going to do?
It is going to embody all of those things which I've explained and believed in. How to roll forward the frontiers of freedom, how to bring it about, educating people about what it is all about, giving practical help to the people in Eastern Europe who are trying to do it. They will want to know how to learn. We can give them scholarships, they can come over here. We can get people to go over there to advise them. We can hold conferences where they all get together and learn from one another and perpetuate the ideals. I've also been very active in the environment, and there's a good deal of work to do there on a scientific basis. It is partly educational, it's partly practical, it's enlarging the frontiers of freedom, it's bringing more and more of the world to democracy on the basis of what we in Britain have done. It's taking our leadership to others. They come in, I have telephone calls, how can we do it? One can't give anything like the amount of money which governments can give. But one knows people who, you give them a helping hand, you put them in the way of grants of scholarships, you teach them how to do it. Most of the changes in the world are brought about by a few people who believe things and don't give up. The Sakharovs, the Solzhenitsyns knew what was needed. The next generation, we have to teach how. And the young people have never been made servile or passive by the communist system. The older people have. When I spoke to the young people in Moscow and Leningrad, they're Thatcherite to a man and woman. Isn't it marvelous? But they are ready, raring to go. And we must help them with the how of it. The spirit of enterprise, the spirit, the character that is Britain. We're such a marvelous people. We've done so much for Europe. We've done so much. We've taken to the far-flung corners of the world our legal system, our common law, one of the best in the world, sound, uncorrupt administration, the spirit of enterprise. America practiced it the other side, the best she learned from us. This, we must have a foundation to make certain we have a centre through which it can continue. That is what I will do. The best of Britain to the best of the world.
Margaret Thatcher, thank you very much indeed for talking to us.
My pleasure. Thank you.